Groundwork UK because they're the umbrella body and they cover the whole UK. When you fill in the application form, it goes to them, and sometimes people ask me questions, and it's sort of a bit beyond my knowledge base because it's a sort of question that I'll have to refer back up to Groundwork UK. So at the end of this meeting, I will answer as many questions as I possibly can. But if I don't know the answer to them, I will make a note of them and make sure that I relay it back to you once I've managed to speak to the grants officer team at Groundwork UK. Just a little bit of background. So Tesco have been running their funding scheme since 2016. They have donated over £5 million now, and community organisations across the West Midlands have received, I think in the UK as a whole, 69,000 different funding grants have been allocated. The funding is all allocated using a store vote system. So hopefully if any of you shop at a Tesco store, you will have seen Tesco's voting booths, and they use the voting booth to decide how much funding each group's got. So every quarter, so every 3 months, 3 projects are chosen to go into the voting booths in all the local stores. Customers are asked to vote for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, the group with the most votes will get £1,500. The second most will get 1,000, and the third place will get 500. So even if you got no votes at all, you would still be guaranteed £500. The way that Tesco run the scheme is they have split the entire of the UK into regions, around 600 odd, and each region has between 1 and around 10 stores in it. So it normally has 1 big store and a handful of express stores, and all the stores in that region will have the same 3 projects. So if, for example, you're in Solihull and you go into the Monk's Path store, they will have the same projects as the Knowles store and the Dickens Heath store, and I believe the Lode Lane store. So you're applying for your region, and on the application form, it asks you what is the postcode of your closest Tesco store, and that's how they assign you to the correct region. So when you're filling in that application form, have a think. You might not want to be in the region where your office is based. You might want to be in the region where all your users are based, because you're reliant on customer votes. You want to be where people will vote for you. So that is something to consider when you're applying, and it's also relevant, which I'll come to later, if you are thinking of putting in more than 1 application. Okay, who can apply? I think this is one of the positives of the Tesco funding, that it is really, really wide open. There's a lot of different organisations are eligible to apply. Any constituted not-for-profit organisation. So I've got a list there. So we've got charities, schools, PTAs, hospices, Scouts and Guides. In order to apply, you need to be not-for-profit, and you need to have some sort of governing document that says who you are and how you are managed financially. And that's mainly because we need some sort of anti-fraud checks in place. So Tesco, it's a very small grant scheme. It's not thousands of pounds, it's quite small, and they are keen that the money goes locally. And so it is eligible for groups that are very small, and so you don't need to be a registered charity to apply for Tesco funding. If you are a group and you're not on that list and you're not sure if it applies to you, and if you are eligible, then you can email me and I'm happy to sort of chat through what your group structure is and whether you would be eligible to apply or not for the funding. Just looking at the regions, so I talked about regions earlier, and each region has, as I said, a handful of stores in it. When you are applying, these are the regions in Solihull and Warwickshire. So as I said, the postcode of your nearest store equates to the region that you will be assigned to. Some regions have higher application levels than other regions. I say one of the disadvantages of Tesco funding is it's not a very quick fund, so it can typically take around 6 months from filling in your application form to getting the funding. However, if you apply somewhere which has got a lot of other groups also applying, you're likely to be waiting longer. So some groups, some regions, you might be waiting 12, even 18 plus months. In some regions, for reasons unknown to me, we have fewer applications. So if you are applying in a low application level area, you're likely to get the funding sooner. And if you want to know sort of like the timescales involved with your application, I'm happy for you to contact me, and I can give you an indication of when I think you'll get your funding if you were to apply now, based on application levels in your region. It's a bit of a moving feast. They do go up and down, and so they vary. At the moment, in the Warwickshire and Solihull area, we are quite low on applications in the Solihull West region. No, sorry, not west, east. Solihull East region. So that's the sort of Monks Pass, Knoll, Dorridge, Dickens Heath kind of area. We're also low in Southam, and I know it's not on this list, but if anybody works slightly further south into Shipston upon Stour, we're always low on applications in Shipston upon Stour as well. So those are currently our lower application areas. But just because you're in a higher application area, it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. It just worth bearing in mind that the timescales involved might be slightly longer. Another huge positive of the Tesco funding is it's very wide open what you can apply for. So the remit is supporting the local community, particularly children and young people, but there's a whole plethora of projects that could involve. So I've got a bit of a list there of the types of projects, but honestly, we just see hundreds of different projects all the time. I do have a couple of case studies too. So we've got a school here that applied for Forest School Sessions, and they got £1,500. A NHS charity, and they applied for funding to redo one of the wards, to make it more welcoming for children. And then also we get a lot of food with the current cost of living crisis, food insecurity projects. So this is a community pantry that was set up in a school, and that also got funding from Tesco. This is the application process. So if you start at the top left, you fill in a project application. Applications are assessed by our central team, so that's assessed by Groundwork UK, and they check that the application is eligible. So they check that you are an eligible organisation, and they do a few more checks, anti-fraud checks, and then they also check that your application is of a good enough quality. And then you'll sit then, after you've been assessed, as long as you're eligible, you sit in a pile of all the other eligible applications in your region. And then every 3 months, we run shortlisting panel meetings, and 3 are chosen. The shortlisting panel meetings sometimes take place in Tesco stores, sometimes they're internal at Groundwork UK. So if you think the panel meetings, when you are writing the application, you are aiming to write it for Tesco staff, because they're the ones that get to decide who is in their store vote. So you don't want to fill it full of loads of jargon and statistics. They know their local communities, so you want to paint a picture of the project that you want to deliver. After you've been selected, you're in store for 3 months. So the current projects that are in now will be in for April, May, June. So if you apply now, it's very likely you will end up in October, November, December, because they're in the process of choosing July, August, September. So unless you press the submit button within the next week, it's more likely at the very earliest you will end up in the October, November, December store vote. Customers will vote for all of October, November, December. They spend about a month counting and verifying the votes. So if you were to apply now, the very soonest you'd likely to get your funding is early February. So that's what I was talking about, timelines. So with Tesco funding, it's not a good idea to apply for a project that you desperately need to fund soon. It is better to apply for a project where you know you want the funding, but it doesn't need to be delivered urgently. And it's best not to put a date or a time on the project. So if you want a project to deliver sessions during the school holidays, don't say we want to deliver sessions during the 2026 school holidays. Just say we will deliver holiday sessions, and then whenever you get the funding, you can use it. If you say you need the project for a particular date and that date passes, then your application will become ineligible because it's no longer you can no longer deliver the project. And when you apply for a project, and and then you get in the store vote. So the results are announced 6 to 8 weeks after voting is completed. And then you're asked to fill in a form where we collect your bank details, and then the money is transferred to you. And then you have 12 months to complete your project. So from the date that you get your funding, you have another year to deliver the project. As soon as you've delivered it, you can fill in an end of project completion form, and if you so desire, you can apply again for the same project or a completely different project. That's the timeline. These are my tips for filling in the application. So this is my top tips. Apply for the full amount. Apply for the full £1,500. Obviously, you will only get it if you come first in the store vote. If you come second, you'll get 1,000, and if you come third, you'll get 500. But if you only apply for 1,000, if you come first, you will only get 1,000. So it's best to aim for the top amount so that if you do win, you will get the 1,500. Make sure on the application you mention exactly what you do with the money. We get a lot of groups that are quite vague on their application. So they'll say something like, we will set up a gardening club. And when it comes to the panel meetings, often the panel don't feel that that's enough information for them to decide whether to fund it or not. So what they want to know is, will there be weekly gardening clubs? You know, how many people will be invited? They want to know the details of how the clubs will work so that they know that it's good value for money. So try and add as much detail as you can. Hopefully it goes without saying that you want to say why the project is needed. As I've already mentioned, don't use too much jargon and statistics. You want to paint a picture. The whole project description, you only have 300 words, so it's not a massive amount of space. Often I think you want to start with an explanation of what your group is, what your project entails, why it's needed, and that's probably will cover your 300 words. Also on the application form are a couple of other questions which don't look as important. So they ask you for a project title and a one-line description. So the project title has to be 4 words or fewer, and the one-line description has to be under 180 characters, including spaces. But actually, those 2 questions are very important because those are the 2 things that will appear on the voting booth along with your organisation name. Do you need to make sure that they sound good and they're going to appeal to customer vote so that they vote for you? So if you think about the application form, the 300-word project description is what the panel members read to decide who's going to be in their store voting booth, and then the one-line description and project title are what appear on the voting booth, and that's what's going to entice customers to vote for you, so you get one of the higher amounts, the 1,500. It can very much depend on who you are up against, how much money you will get. So sometimes you might the most wonderful application in the world, but if you are up against another group that's more popular, I always give Acorns Children's Hospice as an example. They regularly come first, no matter who they're up against. So don't take it too to heart if you don't get the very top amount, but always aim to get the top amount by putting your very best answers for question 7 and 13, the title and one-line description. And then finally, keep saving your application. It is quite an old application system and it times out quite quickly. So to avoid losing all your precious work that you've spent hours on, which I'm sure we've all done, keep saving it or answer all the questions in a Word document and cut and paste them across. And then finally, I've got me and a couple of colleagues, and our job is just to support groups in the West Midlands to apply for funding. So if you have any questions at all, they're my contact details. I'll put them in the chat as well. If you happen to have joined this meeting from outside the West Midlands, which I don't think we will have at this meeting, there's somebody like me in every single area of the UK. So I've just popped in the contact details that you need to ask about who will be your local enabler. And then at the bottom, I've got a link to the application form. No question is too ridiculous or too silly. Some people as well get really stuck. As I said, the application the portal is getting quite old now, and some people's computers get sort of stuck in a loop or they get locked out. Any problems like that, don't spend hours on this application. It's not a massive amount of money. I always think if you're spending more than about an hour filling in this application, you're probably spending too much time, putting too much effort in. So do give me a call or email me if you've got any questions at all about the funding. Now, I did very quickly want to just show you the actual application form. Colin, have we got time for this? Is this okay?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Michelle.
So can you see that I've changed to a different screen? Can you see it? It's like a web page now. Is that? Yep.
Yes.
So this is the web page. So it's all online. You come, I think when you click on the link, you come to this one. So you want to apply at the top, you want to press apply for a grant. And then scroll down. There is a whole host of guidance notes, so anything I've missed today hopefully will be answered in that section. This one just you can use this link to find out the postcode of your closest Tesco store, but you may well know where your closest Tesco store is. And then finally, to actually fill in the application, you press here on the apply now button, and it asks you to set up an email address and a password. If you've never applied before, you have to press new applicant and it asks you to set it up. But I've applied before, so let me just get mine. I've got an example one. When you first log in, it takes you directly to the application form, but every subsequent time you log in, you get taken to this portal, what we call it, and your application. I keep starting new applications, so I've got loads here, but you'll probably just have one there. And this is what the application looks like. It looks a bit daunting. It looks quite long, but it asks you to fill in your address 3 times. It isn't actually as long as it looks. And as I said, I think around an hour, maybe a little longer if you're really putting a lot of time and effort in. The first page is all just contact details that it wants. If you're not a charity or like a school or a public organisation, it also does ask for ID documents from the main contact, and that's just an anti-fraud check so that we can check that you are who you say you are. The second page is probably more important. So it asks that's that question about the project name. It asks a little bit more information, and then this is the main area where you have to do some writing. So you're asking 300 words to describe your project, and just above it is that very important one, the 1-line description. And then the rest of it is often just a lot of tick boxes. They ask you like a little bit of information about who and their names, and then if there's any permissions required and what safeguarding you have in place. The next page is finances. I always tell people with the finance section, you don't want to sort of go to the penny. You just want to give approximate amounts. If you think you might be waiting 6, 9, 12 months to get the funding, so costings will likely change anyway. So for example, if you were running sort of a holiday activities, you might say refreshments for 3 events, £500, staff time, £500, room hire, £500, something quite general like that. You don't want to go into too much detail, but then again, you also don't want to just put 1 line activities 1,500, because the panel do use these costings to get a little bit of an idea of what you will be spending the money on. So try and split it up into at least 3. You can use all 10 if you've got a very complicated project. It does ask about match funding if you've got it. The next page, page 4, is for schools. If you are not a school, you don't have to fill any of this page in. Just leave it all blank. If you are a school, hopefully it will be simple for you to fill in. Page 5 is just a privacy notice. So it just tells you what we would do with your data. So you just need to tick a box to say you are happy for us to process your data in the way that's explained. And page 6 is the last page. That's the declaration. So you sign it, and then also at one point you have to upload a copy of your group's governance document or constitution. This is probably one of the areas where groups are most likely to go wrong. So often groups don't manage to upload something correctly into this. It is, I think, a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. You choose a file. Let's go with, let me just choose a file. There we go. And then it's not uploaded yet. You then have to press upload. So it isn't upload until it's gone green. So don't try and submit your application without that, because that's often applications sit on the system because they haven't got that constitution uploaded, and then people think they've applied, but actually it's sat on the system ineligible. You will receive an email from Groundwork UK telling you that you need to, but a lot of groups seem to miss that, and then their application isn't eligible. So remove that, and then you just sign it. So it's quite a quick and easy. At the end, you have to review it. And again, don't think you've submitted it just because you've pressed reviewed. Obviously, I've not filled it in, so it's telling me everything that's missing. You then have to go back down to the bottom and press submit. So if you think you've applied, but you haven't heard anything for a while, and you're just a bit worried that maybe it's not gone through properly, again, just contact me. I can see all the applications on the system. So about a week after you've applied, they appear on my database. So if you want to double check after you've pressed the submit button that you're definitely on the system, then feel free to drop me a quick email. Just remove those two. And then finally, we did invite the Tesco Community Champion to join this call, but unfortunately she wasn't available. So Tesco's, hold on. Okay. Go the wrong way. So Tesco, as well as offering the funding, they also are very active in their local community. And so they run a system where majority of the big stores have somebody called a community champion in place. So this is Jill. She's a community champion at the Solihull Monks Pass store. And there's other community. There's a community champion at the Atherson store. There's one at the Leamington and the Warwick stores. Some of the big stores like Bedworth doesn't have one. It's a little bit hit and miss. If you want extra support from Tesco, it is worth approaching your local community champion. So they can help with a number of things. One thing they often help with is supporting with grant applications, especially if you're not applying for a children and young people project. You might want to go and speak to them and see if they will support your application. Obviously, they might be on the panel, so they might be more likely to choose it, and they might also decide to nominate your group. So because Tesco prioritise children and young people, if you're not applying for a project that's for children and young people, you might want to make contact with somebody like Jill at your local store to see if they will help support your application. They can also offer donations and in-kind support. So they have a small budget of their own, so they can provide things like raffle prizes and sports day refreshments and other event-related support. They also sometimes have clearance stock, which they're able to redistribute to groups in need. They coordinate all the food donations. So Tesco have a really strict process where they try not to create any food waste. So if they give out food waste at food that is close to its use by date at the end of the day. So if you're interested in collecting food from a Tesco store, the community champion is the person to reach out to. They do also facilitate awareness days and fundraising events. They've recently, a lot of the community champions are doing a lot of activities for the VE Day celebrations. So setting up activities in their community rooms or going out to activities, supplying sort of cakes and refreshments at those. And finally, they also do some communication and outreach. And so they're quite well connected. They've got notice boards in store if you want to put any information on there. They're happy to sort of spread information to the local community. Oh, you don't want to see that? Excellent. Right, I think I've covered everything. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jill. That was really comprehensive. So yeah, we'll just open it up to questions. If people want to raise a hand, we'll come to you.